US Treasury Chief Janet Yellen is heading to China. She'll be in Beijing from the 6th to the 9th of July. What's on the agenda? Mending the fractured US-China ties. And Yellen is not the first American official to attempt this. Last month, it was US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He was the senior-most American official to visit China in 5 years. That visit was sort of an icebreaker, but it ended in awkward headlines thanks to US President Joe Biden. You may remember this. While Blinken was in China, Biden made a rather blunt statement. He called Xi Jinping a dictator. That statement made it to the headlines. There was talk about US-China ties deteriorating further or America being confused. Because on one side, Biden was calling Xi a dictator. On the other, his foreign minister was trying to repair ties. Talk about mixed signals. But what explains this split? Why is there a gap between public statements and political moves? Because China and the US need each other. Their economies need each other. It's like being trapped in a bad relationship they can't get out of. Look at this statement by the US Treasury Department. It talked about Yellen's upcoming visit, and I'm quoting from what it said. Yellen is expected to discuss with her counterparts the importance for both countries to responsibly manage our relationship, communicate directly about areas of concern, and work together to address global changes. Responsibly manage our relationship. Sounds like a polite way of saying, let's dial down the rhetoric. Yellen's trip has two main objectives. One, to stabilize the relationship, meet Chinese officials, talk to American companies doing business in China, and basically do some good old damage control. The expectations are not very high, though. The idea is to avoid more friction. The second objective is debt relief for developing nations. Now, we all know that China is infamous for lending money. It's their favorite form of diplomacy. But what happens when these countries can't repay the debt? That's what Yellen plans to discuss, to use the mounting debt problem to build pressure on China. But it still begs the question, what is Washington's strategy vis-a-vis China? Are they trying to contain China or cooperate with it? Or do a little bit of both, which may be a complete botch-up? On one hand, there's talk of a Cold War, America building alliances to counter China, signing up with partners in the Indo-Pacific, cooperation in the global chip market, every effort to leave Beijing out. There are spying claims, trade disputes, and of course the Taiwan issue. On the other hand, there's the economy. The US and Chinese economies are very interdependent, and decoupling will come with widespread consequences. Do you know what the CIA chief said about this? His name is William Burns. He said a US decoupling from China would be foolish. And if you look at the numbers, you'll know why he says this. Last year, US-China bilateral trade reached a record $690 billion. Total US imports from China were $564 billion. And trade aside, their markets are closely linked. China is the second largest foreign holder of US Treasury securities. It is a record $859 billion. If China starts selling these holdings, it would disrupt the US economy. Similarly, if the US defaults on its debt, China would be in deep trouble. And this makes any sort of decoupling incredibly hard. Both Beijing and Washington, D.C. know this. And so should countries that are putting their eggs in the American basket. This Cold War between the US and China is nothing like the last one. It's very different from what played out between the Soviet Union and the US. There's a lot of money at stake. So America's political rhetoric may be heated, but the economic reality is very different, and it won't change overnight. So Yellen must go and make the most of a bad situation.